So, you want to make a no-budget film. Or maybe you don't. Maybe you're just randomly surfing and landed on this and you're just watching it to goof off because your boss isn't looking over your shoulder at the particular moment in time in your cubicle. That's fine too. That's cool. I don't really care why you're here. But that is what I'm going to be talking about. So, what the hell do I mean by no-budget film? I mean, how's that even possible? I mean, films cost millions and millions of dollars, right? That's crazy. Well, you can certainly make a film for something that nobody in Hollywood would look at and actually call a budget. In fact, they'd probably look at it and go, that's not a budget. That's lunch money. See, what the hell do you think you're doing? But the problem is, Hollywood knows how to do exactly one thing consistently. Spend way too much money on everything. Here's just a couple of examples. I've talked before on this channel about a show called Star Blazers that had a huge influence on me growing up. In Japan, it was known as Space Battleship Yamato. It was sort of a national treasure over there, and in 2010 it culminated in this lavish live-action production that turned out to be the most expensive film ever to come out of Japan at a staggering cost of $22 million. And it looks like this. It's not even that it looks cheap. By contrast, Robert Downey Jr. got paid $20 million for Avengers Endgame alone. That's for one actor. What paid for almost an entire movie in another country. Why is this how this goes? I mean, to take a contrary example to that attitude, the lead actor in this film, who's an incredibly popular actor in Japan, actually willingly took a pay cut on the film so that some of his salary could be given to the special effects department and improve the look of the film. Because he actually cared about the film being good, not buying another mansion. And for another example, there's this thing. Oh yes, we all remember this, don't we? And I'm not even here to discuss whether or not these reshoots actually in any way improved the film, because I think we all know the answer to that at this point. No, I'm talking about a certain sort of mindset that leads to digitally taking a guy's mustache off when, I don't know, one of these things. There, problem solved. Why couldn't they just do that? Because Henry Cavill was making Mission Impossible at the time, for which he had grown a mustache, and they wouldn't let him shave it off unless the production for Justice League actually paid the Mission Impossible crew $3 million to digitally re-add Henry Cavill's mustache. Just contemplate that again. $3 million for a mustache. The hell happened to these things? This did not cost $3 million. You know, there's a long and illustrious history of fake facial hair in the movies. According to director Christopher McQuarrie, today's high-def cameras would never let something like this slide. Mr. McQuarrie, you wrote Usual Suspects, and I'll always respect you for that, but that is just bullshit. Do you think these actors playing these dwarves in the Hobbit films actually had these crazy beards and mustaches? Or that they were added by CGI? No, these are prosthetics. These are the time-honored way to stick some extra hair on an actor's face. But whatever. If for some reason you absolutely have to have a digital mustache, Mustachio generatus. Wow, look at that. A digital mustache. It's actually Henry Cavill's mustache, no less, and nicked it right off of a photograph of him. Where did I get $3 million, you might be asking? I didn't. You see, that's the thing. I'm not actually here to bash on special effects. I'm here to bash on the fact that people get paid way too much to do them. That's the key to making a no-budget film. You see, in a regular film, you got all these people doing all of these different jobs. I don't know what half of these people do. Seriously, who is that person? Who is that? What does the line producer even do? I seriously don't know. You don't need all of these people. Now, if you were making the Avengers, maybe you would, but you're not making the Avengers. You're making something a little more sane in terms of scale. For the kind of film you're going to be making, you basically need 4 things. 1, an idea. 2, some kind of camera. 3, some people to be in it. And 4, some software to cut the whole thing together. And that's really it. I mean, Look at El Mariachi. This film was considered an absolute amazing feat back in the 1990s because Robert Rodriguez made the film for just $7,000. But where did most of that $7,000 go? To the film. Same thing with Christopher Nolan's debut feature, Following. The man who now makes some of the most expensive films ever also started off making a film for $7,000 using friends and family in the cast. Also, Shane Carruth's Primer, one of the greatest time travel stories of all time, just $7,000. It cost that much because film's expensive. But you don't need film anymore. That's the great thing about modern technology. We've moved past the need for film to have a decent picture. I mean, David Lynch's last studio film, Inland Empire, was actually shot on a standard def Sony Handycam. Steven Soderbergh shot the entirety of Unsane on an iPhone, kind of just to prove he could. These are established directors bucking the trend. Heck, up-and-coming horror director Mike Flanagan made his debut feature, Absentia, on a camera that's basically the same as the one I'm using right here, a digital SLR camera. And most of the film was shot in his own home and in the surrounding neighborhood, including this cool tunnel up the ways. He made the best of what he had conveniently available. This is possible if you just write a film that you already have the capability of doing. If you have certain locations, certain people, certain props, whatever. Something that's within your means, something with few characters, for example, would be a really great way to start. You know, the Ryan Reynolds film Buried, possibly the most extreme example of that. A guy and a box and some dirt. There you go. Except they hired Ryan Reynolds. You see, that's where the money went. You don't have to hire Ryan Reynolds. Now, this does put a lot of weight on the shoulders of whoever you do end up using because they have to carry the whole film. But the more characters you have, the harder it is to organize these things. Let me take a trip back in time to 1990, to the first time we tried to make a serious film. It was called, yes, Men in Black. Yeah, who the hell knew? Who the hell knew that 7 years later a film with that exact same title and based on the same urban legend would make shit tons of money? Not us. In fact, I'm not actually accusing them of taking the idea from us, because they didn't. Their film was a comedy, the Men in Black were the good guys, and our film was much more about these half-human, half-alien guys that dressed in trench coats and used this giant city as a lab to study human behavior, and that's the plot of Dark City, not Men in Black at all. Not that I'm saying they took the idea from us either. Our city was more like a mall, and eventually the characters went down into these tunnels underneath the mall and found out what the bad guys were doing, and that's the plot of Stranger Things Season 3. Not saying they took it from us either, because really, seriously, the possibility that they even saw our film is pretty much negligible. But seriously, did they actually have to shoot in the same goddamn mall that we did just to cut us open with a cheese grater and pour some bags of salt in there? Anyway, the point being, Men in Black started off fairly simple, just following a character here, a character there, but then came the episode when all the characters were going to have to meet in one place. And that was the last real shoot ever to be done on Men in Black. It became impossible. Most of the people that we had roped into this were stepping in to do a scene here and do a scene there, and that was it. It wasn't something that they were signing up for in terms of this big epic. People couldn't all show up at the same time. Why is this angle so ridiculously severe? To not show that couch behind him where the other characters would be sitting eventually when they got there. Or to not show characters that had already shown up, done their scenes, and had to go home. This is not something you want to do. You want to make something that's contained enough and that has only people that are really excited, or at least willing, to be in your film. And just like with these low-budget films, we cast people that we knew, family members, and in the case of our lead, someone I didn't particularly know well but worked with and who struck me as being similar to the character I'd written. That's another great shortcut. If you know who's going to be playing the part, you can write the character to sound like them. And, if you don't have that ability, find somebody that gives you the feeling of the character so there's more authenticity and less actual acting involved. Another great thing to have done is to already have made a whole bunch of short films, because those are great practice. We used to make fake trailers all the time. This is a great way to work on technique, pacing, editing, and things like that. I figured there was no reason we couldn't do a feature using the same techniques we'd use for these shorter films, only for longer. Now for this film, we plan to have a movie playing within the movie. The idea came from the fact that it's sort of a basic babysitter scenario, and in those sorts of films, typically you see people watching things on TV, such as in Halloween, when they're watching the original Thing from Another World, or in Nightmare on Elm Street, where they're watching the original Evil Dead. Now, we couldn't use films like that because we'd have to license them. So, we could make our own film and have it sort of reflect the film that we're making now in some sort of way. I kind of blame Alan Moore for the fact that ever since reading Watchmen, I've not been able to conceive of a story that didn't have another story nested in it. That's your fault, Buster. In any case, making the film within a film is where we started, because it's not that different from making the little fake trailer things that we used to do, since you don't have to make the entire film. Something that would be way too daunting to shoot in its entirety is entirely plausible if you just plan to shoot certain key scenes, so that's where we started. The idea was that eventually we could have that all cut together in time to do live playback in the scenes where characters are watching it on TV. So of course, to this date, with about 95% of the film shot, we have not done live playback on the Thing one single time so far. It might happen, but I ain't holding my breath at this point. Our film within a film was basically my homage to the movie Ghost Story, a film I saw when I was too young to have seen it and which scared the crap out of me. And now I'm going to pass that along to the next generation of kids. I hope. Like Ghost Story, our film is set in a snowbound town with some ancient curse coming back to haunt the people in the present. Except that we live in Atlanta, Georgia. Atlanta is not typically known for being snowbound, except for that, that one time recently when we were totally not prepared for it. But for the most part, we can't schedule around when it might snow. In fact, Ghost Story couldn't do it either. They shot in upstate New York in the winter, and it didn't snow that year. They had to hire out every snow machine that could be found all across the country in order to even slightly give the impression of a snowstorm. And when that failed, they resorted to special effects. At the time, special effects meant matte paintings and things of that sort. Nowadays, those sorts of effects are so much easier. Anyone with Photoshop and something like After Effects can pull that off. Now, if that sounds daunting, I don't blame you. I'm not particularly good at it either. That might surprise some people that have watched videos I've done before, because it seems like I'm always just casually throwing in a special effect here and there. This might have seemed to some people like showing off, but far from it. This was practice. This was me working at stuff I knew I would need to do eventually. I didn't have any experience with After Effects before doing these videos, and, well, let's face it, if you've used it, you know it's a pretty steep learning curve. So any excuse you have to play around with it is a good way to get good at that kind of thing, because it's really useful when you don't have a lot of money, for reasons that you won't even realize until you've been confronted with them and are going, "Oh shit, we've screwed up. What are we going to do?" Such as this scene where, because we were shooting really fast and on a desperate time frame, I didn't notice that I'd left the goddamn lens cap sitting in full view in that chair over there. The little After Effects fuckery. It's gone. There was also this scene that we had to reshoot. Because of focus problems, the original shot sucked. It's amazing how a shot can look in focus on that tiny little screen the camera has and not remotely be in focus when you look at it on a full-size screen. So we had to go back and get it as a pickup. Unfortunately, something had happened in the meantime. It's called spring. All the dead trees had suddenly leafed up, and that great blue glow that was coming through and hitting the backside of the blinds and really selling the idea that it was snowy out there just wasn't there anymore. But with a little After Effects tracking, we could just take the glow from one of the earlier shots and stick it on, and suddenly we've got the best of both worlds. Another advantage to roping in friends and relatives is that they may have been to places that you've never been or would be inconvenient for you to go. Another reason that we were able to pull off the snow scenes is that my father lives in New Hampshire, where it snows all the time. He sent me tons of pictures of snowy landscapes that I was just able to blue or green screen people into. And the snow used in the scene is actual snow. It was something I filmed the very first night I got this camera. I just shot directly beneath a streetlight and got snow on black that could then be added into whatever scene I wanted. Because we didn't have to show outside scenes very often just to establish things here and there, this became something that we could pull off for the film. If the entire film was this ghost story, that would have been a little encumbering. But just for something that was being played back on the television here and there, not that big a problem at all. And while learning this stuff isn't necessarily super duper easy, you have a great resource. You're looking at it right now. It's called YouTube. There's tutorials all over it. Pretty much everything I know about After Effects, I learned from looking up on YouTube. So there's no excuse not to be able to dive into this stuff and smoke all these people that are throwing thousands and thousands of dollars at a film, paying other people to do shit that you could just learn how to do on your own.
Gamelan has the greatest scientists in our galaxy, but sometimes simple solutions are the best.
Exactly. Don't get so caught up in all the new toys that you don't think to look to the past for inspiration. Don't be a digital mustache guy who immediately thinks of the computer as the only possible way to do anything.
That's foolish. You pick the one right tool.
Now, that does not mean you will actually end up doing every job yourself. But if you know how to do them, it's always much more helpful, because turns out if somebody's not reliable, can't make it that particular day, or just flakes on you, you can step into their shoes and pick up the slack and not miss any shooting time. Which leads me to point B. You will probably end up doing everything yourself, because let's face it, you're the one that really wants to do this. Unless you're neck deep in other people that are really excited about making this cheap ass film, it's probably all going to land on you. Now, that will make your film take a lot longer to do, because instead of all of these people, you got you and maybe a trusted producing partner. Believe me, that really comes in handy. Somebody to do all the organizing while you're doing all the technical shit is something that I cannot possibly oversell. At any rate, that concludes this first episode of my journey into making my film, Me and My Shadow. I'll probably do a couple more of these updates as the film goes along. If you're interested in that, then, you know, come on back and see what's happening next time. And if you're expecting this to be about Twin Peaks or something, despite the crazy title, I'm sorry, that's not going to happen.
This may require a slight change of attitude on your part.
Until then, I've got 1,000,001 things to do. Catch you next time.